22 I guess my dad 63 wants yes men for children? I fought him. A little backstory before I begin: I am currently on mental health medical leave of absence at a prestigious college, which I got into of my own academic merit. My parents, particularly my dad, have been financially supporting my college education for the past 4 years. I should also add my dad is African. I only have a few classes left to finish and have been working this summer to be reinstated for the next term of school. I have goals that I have been trying to meet. I meet them pretty consistently, but my perfectionist mindset can cause me to lose confidence in myself if I miss a day. One mistake can cause me to think that I will never be able to get out of this mental rut. I have gotten better with not viewing mistakes from the perfectionist lens, but it still happens from time to time. One day I was gaming in my room, and my dad did his daily check-in with me. He usually asks me how I am doing and what I did that day, to which I answer, and then he leaves. Sometimes he could talk for a couple of hours, rarely ever giving me an opportunity to talk. These were the worst, cause he really made no opportunity to understand me at all, always saying I was making excuses. I have never blamed anyone but me for my issues, but somehow I have been making excuses. However, this particular day he thought the way in which I answered was disrespectful, as if I was implying that he should leave me alone. It's important to state here that I am not a disrespectful person. I listen to my parents. I even respect strangers, even if they disrespect me. He said it was my tone, which I don't think I had, but nevertheless, I tried to remedy the issue by explicitly stating that I was not trying to be disrespectful. I don't think it had an effect though, because his tone and facial expression didn't change. He then said maybe I should have some more goals, such as, and I quote, dusting the small area in front of my TV. In my head, I am like, what? Doing that is meaningless. So I tell him that the task is inconsequential to me. He still insisted upon it, and because I disagreed, he started using my pitfalls in the past few years against me, trying to apply it to this situation, which I didn't think was appropriate. So I started to defend myself. It turned into a small argument where I repeated a lot of the things he said so he could clearly understand my points. He claims I was mimicking him, something I simply don't do. He took great offense to that. I responded by saying I am not mimicking. Mimicking is not something I do. Again, this had no effect. I didn't understand why my dad was feeling disrespected and being so hostile, because I told him I am not trying to be disrespectful in any capacity. I was really hurt by combative use of my issues against me. I told him that doesn't make sense to me. That really set him off though. Did you just say I didn't make any sense? As if I literally meant he was speaking gibberish, another misunderstanding. I didn't respond because at this point he will find any angle to be disrespected. He then in a very commanding tone instructed me to turn off the PlayStation, which I was still playing while talking to him. Not having eye contact is typical for the conversations I have with him because I am still listening. In my head, I am thinking, what did I do to deserve this? I felt like he did it to put me in my place. Weird, considering how much effort I had been making to defuse the situation. Then, I made a mistake. I didn't turn off the PlayStation. I just sat there in silence. He then proceeded to smack me in the head. I have been beaten by my dad before when I had done something grievously wrong. This time was different though. He had been ignoring my attempts to defuse the situation and betrayed me. From all of this I get a smack in the head? Nah, that's not fair in the slightest, so I pushed him away from me and said, man, I didn't do anything wrong. He then says, did you just raise your hand at me? I can't make this up. He then tried to come at me again, but this time I rushed him because I wasn't going to allow that again. Another thing I should have done out of respect for him as my dad. I am not even a fighter. My little brother tried to intervene to no avail. I didn't throw any punches or anything, but I managed to pin him to the floor. In that moment, I was more confused and sad than anything. I kept telling him that I didn't do anything wrong. Eventually, I got up and he said I crossed the line big time. Again, I said I didn't do anything wrong. He then proceeded to demean me, saying I couldn't even finish college and that I was lazy. I felt and still feel so hurt by those comments, so I told him he has never helped me at all, referring to the talks he would give me. He then took all my devices and left. We didn't talk for a few days. I really wanted things to return to normal, so I tried to break the stalemate by sending a text about how I feel we should talk and how I was feeling in the moment. I found the phone and took it just to write the text, then put it back. I took extra care in writing, even to the point of having my mom review before I sent it. She wasn't home during the altercation. One morning he returns the phone saying that I would need it to communicate with others. He also said he had read my text and would talk to me about it when he was ready. I was thinking things are on the turn up, we are finally going to have a real conversation. A few days went by and I would constantly see him relaxing watching TV or something, clearly available to talk. Eager to make amends, I asked him one day if he was ready to talk. He said yes, so I walked in and sat down. I had already talked to my mom about it and she convinced me to apologize for getting physical with him in the first place. Initially, the only thing I really thought I did wrong was not listening, even though I had justification. In retrospect, just listening prevents the whole relationship fracture from occurring to this extent. Unfortunately, the talk did not go how I thought it would. Considering he had read my text, maybe he had some understanding of where I was coming from. Wrong. In summary, all he did was say that I crossed the line by getting physical with him. He told me he never raised his hand at his dad back in Africa, even though his dad did things that would be considered abuse today. Even if he believed his dad was wrong, he would never do it. As for the text I sent him, he thought it was hilarious. Essentially, there is no possible reason to ever get physical with your dad. He mentioned maybe if the child was always being, and just got fed up, then they would be justified. I could also argue the opposite is true if a parent beats their child for good reasons, but then does it when the child feels unjustified want the child be more inclined to defend themselves? At this point I still hadn't said anything, but was visibly very frustrated with what was being said. As a means to just move on, I told him he was right. He is always right no matter what. How I feel doesn't matter, so I will not express myself to you anymore. He didn't want to hear that though, as he started to be condescending, acting like what he just did didn't fail to acknowledge where he could have and did go wrong. Nothing, before me not listening to turn off the PlayStation, mattered. I got up in frustration because that was completely unfair. I wanted to avoid any kind of argument so he didn't start feeling disrespected by the things I say. Unfortunately, it devolved into one. Luckily, my mom was in the house and came to intervene. This was huge for me. Now I had someone to witness what I was dealing with. The conversation went very similar to the initial one. He was selectively misinterpreting or literally misinterpreting things I say to feel disrespected, but this time my mom was there to support. Not that she chose a side because she saw flaws with what I did during the situation as well, but it was so clear that my dad was choosing not to understand me. We corrected him so many times as he constantly tried to fish for ways to be disrespected. A lot of things were said and nothing was resolved. He simply refused to acknowledge that he did anything wrong, even though in that very moment he was doing what caused me to not listen in the first place. He even tried to accuse me of having my hands on his neck, which is not true. I pinned him. I didn't choke him. He said if I got physical again he would beat me very hard because he is from Africa and didn't know I was capable of doing something like that to him. It's the fact that he feels so victimized to even say that, which is astounding. In the text, I told him I didn't throw punches or slaps and just tried to pin to stop him from aggressing, but he disregarded that when he was having his laugh while reading it. SMH. Because he was certain that he wasn't going to change his mind, he got tired of the conversation and said that the argument was my fault. Remember, he is the one that brought this up. Then I told him that he agreed to the conversation, so trying to say this all started because of me is simply not true. Then I told him by saying it's all my fault he is implying that I commanded him to have this conversation. Guess what he said? Did you just say you commanded me to have this conversation? He even got up like he was about to come at me through my mom. We were shocked. That is not what I said at all. He then said that the point of who started it wasn't important anyway. Really? We didn't even bring it up. Eventually, I started talking with my mom in front of him since he decided to remove himself from the conversation. I recalled the initial situation to her. Selectively, my dad decided to speak again, visibly more upset than before. He tried to say I was lying because he would never be aggressive for no reason, because then he would be at fault. Then I asked him to recall the situation if I was lying. He said when he walked in, my body language was disrespectful. I don't even know how that can be. My body language was disrespectful? I was just sitting there playing the game. He never told me to change my sitting position. And apparently that is enough for him to try to discipline me. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Honestly, I could keep going with all the selective things my dad did, but I am honestly getting tired of writing all this stuff down. In the end, he still didn't recognize my feelings, even though I did with his. My mom thinks that we have to pray about this situation, but I believe my dad is too stubborn and conceited for the relationship to be repaired. I had to secretly record the ending part of the conversation because I am thinking I need more opinions from people close to me. No more my word versus his word. Just straight video evidence. I think the evidence leans in my favor heavily. I could have never imagined I would be in this situation with my dad. It was almost as if he wanted me to disrespect him by the way he was selectively choosing to be disrespected. I know it's my perspective, but I try to be truthful and acknowledge what both sides did wrong. Unfortunately, my dad will try to make me believe I am a problem child. 90% of my life I have been a respectful and obedient child, so for my dad to truly believe I was outright disrespecting him might be proof he has no idea who I am at all, which is hard to believe. Nothing before I actually started doing disrespectful things matters. Why I may have acted differently than my usual self doesn't matter. A similar situation occurred when I first preparing to come home from school, but it was over the phone. I said some things I shouldn't have said, but he never figured it might be because of the fact that he is telling me to leave a large suitcase full of my stuff behind in order to catch a plane. TLDR, my dad was fishing to be disrespected by what I was saying. He refused to listen to my attempts to tell him I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. He then told me to stop what I was doing. I refused because he was being extremely unfair, so he slapped me. Then, I pushed him away and he took major offense to that. He tried to slap me again, but then I rushed him as a means of defending myself. We tried talking things over, but he refused to acknowledge my feelings in the moment, and believed on his feelings had justification. I need advice on what I can do to try amend this situation moving forward, if it is possible. Be honest, PLS. Thanks for reading and responding.